Recording? Okay. Well, welcome to this meeting of the Cemetery Board. I'm Dan Shapiro. I'm Secretary of State, Executive Designee as Chair.
Bob Welch, Dr. Dave Shaw's designee from Department of Health.
And Chris Wiles, representing the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman.
And I have the pleasure of introducing our latest addition to the Division of Cemeteries, Louis Polishuk. You may recall that last meeting we appointed Mr. Polishuk, the Director of the Division of Cemeteries. So he's going to be a great addition, and I will say hello and let Louis introduce himself.
Hello, thank you.
We went over your resume last time in great detail, so, you know,
I
everybody
watched
knows.
it on YouTube.
You did. Pretty on lying. But anyway.
So how we
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay.
It wasn't quite Gangnam Style.
Chet?
Chet Buckwitz, Assistant Director, Division of Cemeteries.
Suzanne Russell, Clerk, Division of Cemeteries.
Joanne Rose, Associate Accountant, Division of Cemeteries.
Tony Melillo, Counsel to the Cemetery Board.
Great. All right, then. Why don't we take a look at the minutes? Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Nice job. I have no comments.
Very good. I only had one, and I did one. And it was just that, and it was very minor. Mr. Shapiro, it's under Division's report. Mr. Shapiro requested if there are any restrictions on payout, and I think it was more general than that. It was just any restrictions, you know, as any Attorney General issues that we would contact the cemetery. So why don't we just strike on payout, say any restrictions. That is it. Motion?
Move that we accept the minutes from the October 17th meeting.
As amended.
Second, Dan.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right, here is my,
With that one addition.
yeah, yeah,
Subtraction.
there you go. Mr. Melillo.
Nothing on the legislative arena. On regulation, we are working on the response to comments, assessment of comments that we received on the pet cemetery regs. There were comments from NISAC, an association of pet cemeteries, and from the New York State Catholic Diocese
Okay.
that we're responding to. And then we are still working on a redraft of the financial regs to present to the board. Now that Louis is aboard, we'll be going over the draft with him before presenting it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Division's report.
Well, the divisions we're going to mention regarding the proposed changes to the rules and regulations of financial reporting, and I guess at least initially there was concern that some of the changes would not really affect much of any kind of savings with respect to certified audits of annual reports. So I guess discussions continue and
Well,
continue to look at that.
That's what comments are for. We want to do the right thing. So you guys will review and let us know what you think. And hopefully next meeting we'll have some commentary. All right. This may be one of the shortest meetings on record. I can feel it coming. This is like a freight train moving. All right, vandalism report.
It's me. For the current fiscal year ending March 31st, 2014, vandalism fees collected were $32,680. Applications granted were $475,600, and applications pending were $608,985. Again, the fees collected are mostly collected, by the end of the fiscal year, which is March, because the annual reports are due March 15th, and so the bulk of the vandalism fees are collected then. After that, it's usually through audits or stragglers. So that's it.
Very good. I could always count on Richard to take up, a half hour, 45 minutes. Apparently, Louis is not following Richard's footsteps in that respect.
I'm perfectly capable.
Thank you
of
very
doing that
much.
if
No,
you
thank you
want
very
me
much. Thank you. All right. Vandalism and abandoned repair orders. We have two. I had questions on one of them. Why don't we start with that? Greenwood Cemetery, there's several $1,000s of repairs. This is a vandalism application for a chapel vault. It includes windows, frames, porch railings, stained glass. Now, we've had discussion at the board level before about what's appropriate, in terms of replacement, whether it's essential for the cemetery to replace with the quality that was broken. So I'm not sure about this one. There wasn't enough in the memo to give me an idea really whether or not this was essential for the cemetery. My thought is that unless you can give us more context, that we just kick it back and pen that and have you come back with a more embracing report.
I have nothing to add at this point.
All right. Did you guys have any questions about that? Because I just didn't have enough.
No.
All right. So why don't we just table that? All right. Bring it back. I want to know whether, to what extent these repairs, as cosmetic repairs, are appropriate to pay, that kind of information. We've had these discussions many times before on these kinds of things. All right. The other one, Jerusalem Cemetery, dangerous monuments. I have no issues. Anybody?
No. As well.
All right. Then, want to do a motion for Jerusalem?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Great. All right, we only have North Steuben on the agenda. Is North Steuben here? Oh, they're outside?
Oh, they came.
Oh, well, they're welcome to come in and join us. In fact, we would love that.
I thought you were calling in.
I
Okay.
just,
You
found
could have
out-
given him a ride.
I think they want it. I didn't do all comments, but
Okay. No, I think that's a good thing.
excellent.
We're done. I have a question.
Hey, Marcos. I was saying we have the shortest. Hey,
Nice to see you. Or I can call you later. See you.
Yeah.
Executives.
I was just saying this may be the shortest meeting on record, and you know why, right? Because Richard's not. No. I'm going to have to send Richard a copy of this tape. I have not
You're
done.
watching at home. Hi,
Yeah,
Richard.
right. I've not done teasing him yet. All right. Well, North Steuben Cemetery is here. We discussed last meeting the donation of land situation. I believe it was about 1/4 of an acre with a church thereon. And we did have some concerns, and so we invited you guys here, and we're happy to see you.
All right.
You want to introduce yourself for the board?
Indeed.
I'm Bob Bolivar, and I'm Secretary Treasurer of the North Steuben Cemetery Association.
Hi, Bob. Nice to have you here.
that one.
Good, I'm Reverend Tom Hunnell, and I'm the property management consultant to the Upper New York Conference Board of Trustees. And it's my responsibility to facilitate these transactions.
Great.
What we have been placing before this board now for quite some time, and this process has been evolving, is really a matter of recognizing what has been historic fact for a very long time. There is a 40 by 60 frame building in 1864. The property on which it sits extends into the cemetery property, so there's some overlap of the cemetery property and the actual land the church sits on. Very close. And this has really been this was a lost property to the United Methodist Church. It had ceased functioning as an active congregation so long ago. The Cemetery Association's use of the building for summer worship and as a focal point for their activities and their life as an organization together, that I think such subsequent generations of United Methodist leaders really thought this was a done deal, and that property had long since been in the hands of the Cemetery Association.
And about when did this,
I
the
come on
Methodist
board
Church stop
with this
functioning?
about 2010, and as I was then chairing the Conference Board of Trustees, and suddenly this property pops up on a discontinued church list for us.
I see.
What is this about? when we started doing our investigating, Bob has been part, and his family have been part of this history a lot longer. He can
Right.
speak to that piece of it. Discover that in fact, in title, it is a United Methodist Church property, and we're going to have to deal with it. So
Who'd been taking care of it all
the Cemetery Association all that time
since what date?
since
The services restarted in 1939, or the church discontinued in 1939. Summer services began again in 1959.
No, what does summer services mean?
There are 4 services held a year: June, July, August, September.
Methodist services?
No, at this point, kind of interdenominational services.
All right. So there was no church direction of the services? Who hosted the services? Who hosted the services?
Well, there was a church board and a cemetery board at one point.
All right.
And the church board did at that point, there was a lay leader who put the services together for the summer each year.
So the church board was the Methodist Church? I mean, who was this church? Was it a not-for-profit religious institution?
They were not all.
No, I'm just trying to get an idea of what kind of institution it was. Was it
It was originally totally Methodist, yes.
Right, it was part of the church. And then there's a church board, and do you know if the church board was a separately incorporated religious corporation? I mean,
We weren't sure if that board was incorporated.
okay. And the Methodist Church didn't have anything to do with that.
connection with it at all.
You had no connection with that. All right,
what was going on that hilltop was going on between the Cemetery Association
Right.
and their community
That's right.
of supporters.
It was really descendants of the original people who attended that church who are now interested.
Okay.
It made sense to us then, when finally we discovered we had this piece of property that we could be held liable for, and so had to take the appropriate steps insurance-wise. But the fact of the matter was that this new life for this building had been in place for decades. And the simplest thing to do would simply be make it official. We have no direct interest in this property at all. It's an unheated, there's no electricity. It is simply a very simple frame structure that has been used as a meeting house, really central meeting houses in this very rural location. And the Cemetery Association has loved it and cared for it and looked after it all this time. We'd be happy to have them continue to do so.
What were the, if you could refresh our recollection or my recollection, what were the parameters of the deal? What was?
The church would be transferred to the Cemetery Association for the transfer costs.
For the cost of the transaction.
And you were to pay legal fees?
The total was to be about $2,500.
And who was paying that?
Cemetery Association.
Cemetery Association.
There were pledges that's from donations.
Usually is, and of course, if this thing does happen, a letter will go out by me immediately soliciting funds to cover all this.
Okay, I think in one of the reports, Mike Simmons' report indicates that the cemeteries received pledges for donations in the amount of, well, in his report, it's $3,000.
Well, we do send a letter every other year soliciting donations, and it's quite well received. But a letter like this, I think, would generate even greater donations for this kind of final official transfer.
Who's been paying the expenses on the property up till now? Has it been the Methodist or the cemetery? And I assume it's been insured, right?
It's insured by the conference at the moment.
And how long has that been the case?
Since we discovered that this property
In 2010.
was tied to us, so about 2010, 2011, somewhere at that point, we put it on our master policy. It
And-
might have been on a little earlier, I'm not sure.
Okay.
We thought it was always covered by the conference, and the conference didn't know they had it.
And that may in some way be true. Understand that 4 separate annual conferences, the diocese and the Catholic system, 4 separate annual conferences came together and merged in 2010. And this property was with one of those merging bodies. So the lack of a clear history in terms of some of that is simply a a result of the merger and the loss of accurate historical record in that regard.
Now, historically, prior to 2010, when the cemetery was really controlling this building, who was doing the upkeep? Who was paying for it?
The mowing bills were paid for by the cemetery. The guy that mowed the cemetery also just went over and mowed the church lawn as well.
Right. What about the structure itself? I imagine there's repairs that have to be affected.
There were minimal upkeep fees on that, of course, and usually done by volunteer work, like the painting of the roof or the painting of the building itself.
Mm-hmm.
The building requires very little maintenance.
Why is that?
It's in pretty good shape.
Okay.
It sounds like it's a fairly simple structure.
It is very
There's
simple.
no utilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's a 40 by 60, approximately 40 by 60 square, with a big concrete pad out front to step out of your carriage.
What other structures are on the cemetery property?
None.
None. All right.
Well, is there a financial benefit to the cemetery to take this property?
Very much so, because the services that are held during the summer, of course, collections are received
Mm-hmm.
at that point where these collections would be used to support both church and cemetery. And without that, and we might be a little hard pressed, we would then depend only on the letter that goes out soliciting donations.
And would you are you acquiring also burial plots?
I understand that the church property runs into the cemetery property, and therefore some of the graves already are on church property.
Yeah, the report said there were about 150 graves that could be potential graves, but I think you only effectuate one burial a year. So 150 graves represents 150 years. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that fiscally, the acquirement of burial space really is an issue in this one. Would you be putting the building to any other uses?
We might hold a special event other than the 4 services a year. Now, I think once this thing is gelled and people do know that it's going to happen, then it will generate a little more enthusiasm, perhaps for an additional event.
Mm-hmm. Where do you store your maintenance equipment?
We don't have to have it stored because the man from Boonville brings his own. And
I see. Okay.
We are the best maintained cemetery in the entire area.
I have to visit you. I really do.
Beautiful.
Seriously. Yeah.
Where is it located?
It's in the town of Steubenton, north of Rome and south of Boonville.
On Route 12?
No, it's on a road called Buck Hill Road.
Okay. No.
Literally is at the top of the mountain. If you keep going, you might move your way down into Alders Creek. I
It's
think,
near there, yes.
As you come down towards 28. But it is a very remote location. There is not a community that surrounds this.
But the real bottom line on this is that the people who are connected with the cemetery are even more so connected with the church.
Mm-hmm.
That is their visible hanging on to point. And without the church, we're going to lose a great deal of enthusiasm for the cemetery. Because their ancestors attended there, and that's why they go back.
But you've really had the church for 50 or so years, and this is going to bring additional expenses to the cemetery, which already has a minimal fund and a minimal budget.
We don't see it incurring very many expenses. We'd have to pick up a liability policy, of course. I have a quote in here on that.
Yeah.
$400-some. It appears to me the expenses would be minimal.
And the other thing that concerned me was I know that the Methodist Church, because I deal with this problem in the Central New York region, is desperate to get rid of properties that have no value and have no congregation anymore. Why is not the church then picking up the cost of the legal fees?
How do we expend the dollars that come into the church for ministries to legitimately, in effect, give those dollars away in a way that does not result in ministry for the United Methodist Church. This association is prepared to pick those fees up and care for this transaction. I don't know what dollars we would go to that we could legitimately then spend in order to accomplish something, the benefits of which accrues to another party.
Well, there's still parishioners there who are Methodists, correct? I mean, that's,
Oh, yes.
you know, so in a sense, seems to me, because we're going to advocate for the cemetery here, Bob. I'm telling you that right now.
The cemetery is asking you to advocate for them too, in terms of the central role this property plays for the association as an association. We dropped back a couple of years to the point at which this conversation began. There was an enormous amount of enthusiasm to see this done. The longer this has drawn on, the more the belief settles in that it's never going to happen, the wearier folk out there are becoming about seeing this accomplished. We need to bring this to a conclusion.
Yeah, I want to make it clear, this came to this board last month, all right? So I don't know how long this has been in the works.
Well, the correspondence goes back a lot further.
Okay, but to this board, it came last month.
Maybe
All right, so we're interested in moving this along as well, all right? But we are concerned. This cemetery does not generate a lot of income. They're taking on a liability, which may also be a positive.
we can try.
What if
Yep.
we could strike a deal where the conference would pay those fees?
That would
Or
be a very
share
good thing.
these.
You're a tough negotiator.
I have no authority to make that.
Now, the other thing that happened, which was kind of divinely timed, was the fact that we just received a letter that we're going to receive $5,000, which is not a huge amount, but it is to us, you see. And it seems to be timed about the right time where this might take place, you see.
Mhm, mhm.
And,
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
One of the things that that might help make this work is if instead of the cemetery taking it over, they created a Friends of Cemetery Association, and that took over the property, and that became, instead of the cemetery using the church for fundraising, but the Friends of Cemetery raise funds so it can maintain the property, and if there's ever any surplus, since it's a Friends of Cemetery Association, the surplus would go to the cemetery. But if there's ever any deficit, it'd be up to that Friends of it to either cover it or determine to take the building down or whatever. It would protect the cemetery from losses, but it would give the cemetery the opportunity to receive gains.
That's a wonderful idea. I don't know
Except-
if that's something that can come to
Except that
fruition.
we go back to square one and start the legal clock running all over again and generate even increased fees to make that happen, if in fact it can happen. And we don't know that it can happen. It has been done. We
have a lot of
I know one
cemeteries
that we
with-
did in Essex County exactly that way.
Okay.
But it just strikes me that nothing changes for the Cemetery Association over what they have been doing and what they have been caring for all along. We can strike a deal on legal costs, to minimize those to the Cemetery Association. Letting this transfer go through simply allows, in fact, what has been happening on the ground on application.
Our concern was twofold. Our concern was with the fiscal situation in the cemetery. I mean, as you said, $5,000 is a lot for the cemetery, and we always look to what's going to happen when the cemetery runs out of space or no longer has income, and that's sort of happening. All right, so we'd like to see permanent maintenance funds built up as robustly as they can be. The other piece is that there is an issue with the cemetery. The liability, as you know, I mean, that's why you want to get rid of the building. There's a liability in possessing it. And the liability is both a matter of folks being on the property, and also what happens if the building has to be taken down, or what happens if it becomes decrepit. You got to remove it. That costs money. All right? So that's the concern. It's very good that you're here and telling us what this means to the cemetery and the community, because that's important. That was the missing link, really. at least for me. I needed to know that the building, in fact, is beneficial to the cemetery, that you're fulfilling your fiduciary obligations in terms of acquiring it. That's not just because you have a soft place in your heart for the church. It's because, in fact, it's what you're saying to us is that it's critical for fundraising, and it's in a sense part of the cemetery already. I get that. All right, understand. But we have legit. I think our concerns are legit. I think we're really concerned about the money and the upkeep and the liability, so that's what we're addressing or getting out of you today. So the liability insurance you're saying is $400 a year, right? That's what you've got.
I have that quote with me.
Yeah. What's the policy? What's the limits of liability on the policy?
I believe they're minimal. Let me see, I just came back from this. Provides $2,500 of business personal property coverage as well as $500,000 limit of liability. The annual premium charge $458.
Would that cover volunteers working on it?
Not sure.
I get concerned, all right, because as you said, you've got folks who are going to work on the roof or paint it. I assume they aren't always professional. They don't have their own policies. Somebody falls through the roof or falls off the building, you got a problem, So that's the kind of thing I think you need to think about.
Is the church in any registry, historic registry or anything?
Not yet, but it could be. I've listed several of my own churches on the National Register.
Right.
What do you guys think?
Well, I'd be more comfortable if we could get rid of that legal fee.
Mm-hmm. Any?
I do think $400 is a minimal expense as far as the insurance. Ultimately, it will be maintenance, but this church, from what you say, is going to be revenue producing. And
It always has been for the cemetery.
and perhaps even more now if you were owning it.
And the only thing I can say is if this does not happen, I'm afraid it will create a great amount of lack of enthusiasm. Because people are closely tied to the cemetery and the church. The two are one and always have been.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Bob?
Again, I'm the non-lawyer here in the group. I keep reading through. I don't see a lot of downside risk.
I agree. I agree with both comments, actually, and I very much would like the church to take on those legal fees, all right? And I think that I'm going to fashion a motion that's going to accommodate that. With respect to the liability insurance, we all agree and vote to approve this thing. All right, look into that. All right. I mean, the cemetery can take care of itself in this respect. We don't need to nanny you through this, but consider, what you need if you're going to have folks working on that building. What would happen if somebody fell off the roof? So talk to your agent about that. And
I think that's an important piece. If that
It is.
what is covered in that policy there.
Yep. But it's no different than having a building your own. I mean, that's why if you had your own building, you'd be having the same concerns. So it's just something for you to look into. All right, so I'll make the motion, and I'll motion to approve contingent upon.
Pass this down.
So-
That seems to be a little bit further explanation of the covenant.
That's great. Okay. Contingent upon the church taking
You're
on
against the conference, too.
the conference.
All of the conference, all of
You can. I can ask the conference to do that. I'll ask them to do that.
that's the entity that you're directing.
Okay, thank you. Contingent on the conference, assuming the costs of the transfer, inclusive of legal fees.
We're still talking roughly 3,000.
That's my understanding.
All right. If Or say anything else? Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. If there's any issues, come back to us. All right? If you can, Tony, why don't you give them your card? If there's any legal issues that need to be discussed, by all means, give a call to Tony. If there's any substantive issues, give a call to Tony. You weren't here for the meeting. He's our counsel.
Can you give me a summary of where we are now then?
We just approved it contingent upon the Methodist Conference assuming the costs of the transaction.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay?
So, Mr. Walber, have your name? My apologies.
By the way, thanks for coming. And that really helped. I mean,
Is that you? That's the one I talked to and never saw your face? Okay, good.
We should get a copy.
Okay. Yep. It's okay, right? Cool, thank you.
I don't know. But I don't know. But it's very minimal policy. But that's up to them. But if you were having table talk, we were just about just who would it cover if it didn't cover folks that you have
I mean,
in
if
your
it didn't
property.
cover volunteers,
But you know what? If you hire somebody, like if you have somebody to work on a roof, all right, who's not qualified to do that. I mean, it's not a professional, just like Dan, which I've done that kind of stuff. I don't know if you void the
I
policy.
would agree right now before the board that we do not use volunteers. If we do anything, we do it with professionals and
Oh, good.
and then solicit the funds from the interested parties.
That you would. I'm not even directing you with that. We already made. You're good.
Well, I know, but I think it's a good idea
Yeah.
not to use volunteers.
Okay. Well, we do volunteer work all the time in the village where I live, and I think it brings the village together, so I'm not trying to discourage you from that. But if you ever want to ask Tony a question about liability insurance, go right ahead. That's what we're here for. All right.
Well, ladies and
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remarkably, we've come to the conclusion of our agenda. So at this time, without breaking, I'll open the floor to comments, concerns, plaudits, anything from folks here. Nothing. Wow. I'm going to go right by you, Dave.
All right, well, in the absence of Mr. Fishman, I hate to get out of here early. So, just briefly, since this is the most well-watched program on the Department of State website, I would like to point out Dave Fleming for the New York State Association of Cemeteries. Again,
We get royalties, by the way.
again, the vandalism fees and disbursements are, we're talking about significant dollar amounts for the current fiscal year.
Yes.
Well in excess of what was approved in the fiscal year budget for the state. And, $1.1 million, $500,000 that's been approved for the current calendar year. And we talk about this all the time, but, just as I've had some recent conversations with cemeterians, the concern is, and this board has been very good at pointing out that you don't halt review of these applications and you continue the review and continue to approve applications that come before you. But there is a delay from the department, from the budget division for the actual payment because there are no funds. And while they're not paid immediately, they're eventually paid. That's true. The problem that we're seeing for some of our cemeterians is that they're going back multiple times getting quotes to cover damages, to have repairs done, and it becomes an administrative burden on these groups, mostly volunteer organizations, where they have to continually be going back to update quotes and so forth as there's a significant delay between when the funds are dispersed and when it's approved. Even the review process.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The issue is that we've made a grant, and if it gets paid 6 months later, let's say, the contractor now may have a different.
Yes, if your disbursement, your calendar year, well, your fiscal year disbursements available to you, your avails end in October, and you're not going to have a disbursement from that fund to this cemetery that's received the approval until April, there's a significant lag time. During that period, the cost could increase.
Okay.
And, I think it's difficult. So I want to point that out, and hopefully that as the budget continues for the upcoming year, I know it's already being worked on, that people can discuss the fact that $500,000 is not enough money.
Okay.
That's all.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, in that case, I'll motion to go into executive session for investigative and litigative matters.
So moved.
Let me just,
Is there only one signature required? Is there only one?
Yeah,
Is it-
because we tabled the other one.
Oh, okay.
as a matter of fact,
Are we recording? We're on, we're back in open session. I have nothing to report, but before exunting, we need to set the next date. I think we had a conflict.
Scheduled for the 18th.
It's scheduled for the
oh,
18th
so let's go
now.
with that.
Oh, you're okay with that?
Yeah, it was.
The
just- it
18th
was
is
just
a
the-
Wednesday, though.
Yeah, it was just the 19th that.
Lou couldn't make 19.
Right, scheduled
Can
for
you
the
do
19th.
18?
18th is a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Thank you.
Wait,
Thank you.
what are we
Wednesday.
moving it to?
18?
Yeah, sorry.
Get back there.
And I'm driving up this time.
In the old days, Amtrak was really iffy. It hasn't
The
been.
first train is usually
Yeah.
viable. I don't know what happened.
I remember sitting on the tracks for hours. It was about
I don't think that's.
15 years ago, and it was just a mess, an absolute mess.
On the way
Do you
back,
have to rent the car?
it is
No.
preferred that we rent a
Yeah.
car. I mean, Albany.
You're not going to get, yeah, they'll
From
go
your
with
house?
It's borderline.
Oh, in cost?
We don't have to discuss this on the record.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
can't do the 18th.
Can't be 18th? Let's do a
Feel
different
free to
day.
meet without me.
No.
Is the meeting closed?
No, we're still on. I'll tell you what, we can,
What about the 20th?
motion,
No.
but we're
No.
going to keep recording. But I'm going to,
I can mute.
Yeah, we can go back,
yeah, so, motion to adjourn.
adjourn, and then we'll.
Yeah. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.